Steven. Yeah. We love a good audio, guys. How was your guys' discussion time? Good? Yeah, ours was really fruitful too. Did you guys get through all the questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes. Did we?
Good, we did. We got through all the questions. Yeah, we even talked a little bit beyond that as well. Listen, I am so excited to be here because this is actually a word that I've been sitting on for quite a few months. Something that in this season that I've been in, God is actually teaching me. And so we're here learning together, which I think is really cool. That He's able to use people even when they're learning as well. And so, yeah, last week we talked about God being useful, right? Does anyone remember last week? Jake spoke about how God is, oh, Ella, I'm glad you remember. That's sweet. One person, that's super cool. Yeah, so last week we talked about how God is useful. And at times, I think that can actually be really confusing. I know for myself, I can think like, okay, yeah, God is useful, but how can He be useful if He doesn't even feel close to me? Anybody else? Is that something just I feel? Okay, yeah, that's what I thought, yeah. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight. Just what's the point? What's the point of following Jesus? What's the point of being loved by God? What's the point of any of it? So yeah, I'm super stoked. When I was in high school, I was a senior, and my high school sent home progress reports every week, which is like really brutal because I was the kind of student that never did her homework ever because I just thought, oh, don't do this. This is really bad. Don't do this. But I thought, oh, I know the material already, and so I would just strive really hard to get A's on essays or on big tests, and then I wouldn't do any of my homework, and then I'd turn all my homework in at the end of the semester and get 50% on everything, and somehow my grade would magically be like an A-. It's like, okay, great, works for me. And so I did that, and there was one particular class that I got a really bad grade on one of the tests, which, like I said, I strived for good grades. And so I got this really bad grade on this test, and it brought my class grade down really low. I had an F in the class. Yeah, and like I said, my school sent home progress reports, right? So each week my parents on Wednesday, which was the days that I did like youth group and stuff, and so of course it's a Wednesday, parents can't see a bad grade then, right? And so yeah, I realized that the progress report was coming out and that I was going to get in trouble because I had an F in the entire class. And not only that, but they would break it down. So my parents they would see more than just, oh, she wasn't doing her homework. They would actually see that I got an F on the test. And so I, being the wonderful, great, studious, kind child I was, I hacked into my mom's email.
Oh. That's smart.
And I deleted the progress report. Okay. Here's the thing. I literally couldn't look at my parents in the eyes for an entire week. Like, I would not go home. I'd stay at school super late and then come home when I knew they were going out to dinner or something, and then come home, or I'd go to my boyfriend's house and hide out there and then come home while they were going to bed, so I wouldn't have to talk to them, I wouldn't have to see them, because every time I'd be around them I would just be thinking, oh my gosh, I totally hacked into my mom's email and deleted my progress report because I had an F on a test, and I was feeling I'm going to get in double the trouble, right? I didn't mean to rhyme that, but that was kind of cool. And so I ended up being so riddled with guilt, and so I can't even be in my own home right now, that I went and I told my parents. Remember how I mentioned they sent progress reports once a week? My parents knew, guys. My mom's yeah, I didn't get a progress report this week, so I looked at my deleted messages, and I knew I didn't delete it, but they never said anything. Neither of my parents. They both knew the entire week that I was walking around just oh no, like I can't say anything. My parents are gonna kill me. They totally knew. And they just were like, yeah, when you're ready, when you're ready. And now I went to my parents, I ended up getting in trouble. I got my phone taken away, I got grounded, and it sucked, and it was horrible, and I never did it ever again. But what's really cool is that my parents gave me a lot of grace because they could have just been really, really mad right off the bat once they saw it, and what they did was they gave me time to feel and to come to them. And in the end, they actually helped me, and they called my teacher and they set me up with someone who could help me study for the test, and my dad talked to the teacher, and the teacher let me do a bunch of extra credit, which was super cool, and that's really all I needed, was just help. And if I would have gone to my parents before and said, hey, I'm kind of struggling, I don't know the material for this test, they totally would have helped me. And it's so crazy, right? That I thought, oh, I'm just gonna fail this test, I know I'm not gonna do well, and I'm just gonna delete the email, it's fine. And so that was a moment that I really got to see God's grace in that. And what's even cooler about God is that he doesn't do grounding, and he doesn't do taking your phone away. All he says is, let me help. And so that's, again, just what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about how we can get there with God and what we can do and the right steps to take. So a little bit of history for you guys, because, like I said, I'm just so studious. I just love history. So in the biblical times, when Jesus was alive, there in Jerusalem was a temple. And this temple was set up in like 3 main sections. And so we had the courtyard, and in the courtyard anyone could go in there, right? Jews, Gentiles alike, with the exception of closer to the walls of the actual temple. That's where only Jews were able to dwell. And then there was like a building, so think like a church, right? If you're at church, you have the courtyard, you have the inside of the building. That's just what it was. However, the only people allowed inside of the temple were the religious leaders, so the Jewish priests of those times. You guys following? I promise it's not going to be this boring the whole time.
It's not boring.
But so that's where the religious leaders were able to go. And in there, what they did was Jews would bring them their animals to sacrifice or bring them prayers. And the religious leader would go inside and he would sacrifice the animal and either bring the meat back out for the family, or he would pray for the family, whatever it was that they were needing. And inside, they called the temple the holy place, and inside the holy place was one last section, and it was like a little room blocked off by a veil or a curtain, is really more like it. And that hung up across, and inside that room was what was known as the most holy place. And that is where only God dwelled. No one else could go in there. No Jewish priests, no anybody could go into the most holy place except for God. So do you guys remember we have the courtyard and then we have the holy place, which is, who were the only people allowed in the holy place? Security. Yep, nailed it. Yeah. The religious leaders, the Jewish priests.
That was where the Ark of the Covenant was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then past that we have this curtain that is blocking off the most holy place. And who dwells in the most holy place? God. Right. Cool. Wow, you guys, you're learning so much. I'm so proud of you. Wow. Like you're in school. It's so great. And so, nobody was allowed behind the veil. So basically, if you weren't a religious leader, you weren't getting anywhere close to the most holy place. And if you were a Gentile, you weren't even really getting close to the holy place. And honestly, that's why Jesus is so incredibly important. So we'll get into that. Listen carefully. This is where everything changes. In Matthew 27, we hear the story of Jesus' crucifixion. I think we maybe all know this story, right? And as we're nearing the end of the crucifixion, Jesus is on the cross, and he takes a big breath, and he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? And he breathes out, and he dies. He's crucified, and he's gone. And in Matthew 27, we get this verse. Matthew 27:51 says, and behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split. Should I read that again?
Yes.
Yes. It says, behold, the curtain, or the veil, right? The veil in the temple. The curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks were split. Did you hear that? The curtain was torn. Does that excite anybody else?
Yes.
Like, Jesus dies, and the curtain's just like, no more.
It's like,
Yeah, it's incredible. It's so great. And if you don't understand the significance of that, let me just tell you in a little different means, in a different way. So the minute Jesus took his last breath, he dies, and God says, boom, I'm leaving the most holy place to be with you. The curtain's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. And God says, I'm coming out from here to be with you. God made the sacrifice for God to be with us. We didn't have to do anything. We didn't have to feel away from God because he was right next to us. It's just such a cool and beautiful just representation of what God is for us. And so another piece of history to note. Do you guys know what a contract is?
yes.
Yeah, so a contract is like, they'll write something out, it maybe has a promise on it that you have to keep, or maybe it's a job that you have to abide by, or something like that. And each person that is saying, this is my promise to you, or vice versa, they're gonna sign that contract, and that means I won't break this, and if I do, then whatever's in the contract, I have to either pay, or whatever that looks like. Now, in biblical times, a contract looked a little differently. Obviously, they didn't just have computers to type one up and sign. And so what they did was they would, sorry, it's a little brutal, but they would take an animal, generally a lamb. They would sacrifice that animal. They would spread the blood and separate them, and each person would walk through. And what that signified was the person walking through is saying, if I break this covenant with you, if I break this contract with you, then let this be my blood that you walk over. Right? Okay. So do you guys know like what Jesus is most commonly called? The Lamb.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So basically what the Bible tells us is that the Lamb was sacrificed as a promise to us that we will dwell with God forever. As a covenant to us that we will be with him forever. God really just made the ultimate sacrifice so we didn't have to. We no longer have to walk through the blood of the lamb and say, sorry, God. We don't have to do that. In fact, God more so said, you didn't hold up your end of the bargain, but I took the consequences instead, and now we don't even have a bargain. It's just you and me forever. Just you and me forever. That's it. And I think that's really incredible news. What it means is that we have full and complete access to every holy thing that God has to offer. And that's really because he sacrificed himself so that we could be with him. And I'm going to say that a lot tonight. Just drill that into your brain. He sacrificed himself so that we could be with him forever. We didn't have to do anything. So because of that, I'm sure now you guys, like I said, I'm going to say that a bunch of times. And now you're probably thinking like, okay, cool, Haley. Yeah, I accepted Jesus, I follow Jesus, and I have full access to him. That sounds really lovely. That sounds really great. How come I don't feel like that often, or ever, or sometimes, or what's the deal? What's going wrong? If God says he's going to step out from behind the curtain to be with me, why can't I feel it? Where's he at? And to be honest, I felt that way. I felt that way 100 times. Felt that way 1,000 times, I'm sure. Anybody in this room has felt this way, leaders and students alike. We've all felt this moment of like, okay, what's going on? Where's he at? It doesn't feel like he's around. And honestly, this is because while the curtains for the most holy place were torn down a very long time ago, oftentimes we can put our own curtains up between us and God. And we can put our own veils up that says, God's behind there, I'm not good enough to be there, I won't be there. And really that comes in the form of many things. Your veil could be drugs, alcohol, lying, cheating, stealing, sex, anger, any of it. That could be your veil. And each time that these things are happening in your life, and there's so many things, and you're not just sitting with God and being honest with him and talking to him, because again, he says you don't have to do anything to accept me, or for me to accept you. Just have to be. And when we're doing things or feeling things or we're angry or we're sad or we're, again, doing things we maybe know we shouldn't, but you feel some kind of guilt, we're guilty, we feel shame, all of those things, it's just veil after veil after veil after veil, and God is further and further and further and further behind those veils. We're putting up barriers between us and our useful God. We're putting up barriers between us and the most holy place. We're putting up barriers, honestly, between us and hope. So if you've been around for a while, then you know that part of my story is that I struggle with a really intense autoimmune disorder. I'm sick quite often, and I've had a lot of health complications between doctor's visits, hospital visits, surgeries, and honestly just a lot of pain. I have felt really defeated at times and so sick that I honestly had no hope. Zero. And because I had no hope, I was incredibly angry at God. Like really, 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 really angry. And about 6 months ago, I was the sickest I've ever been. And I was pretty much laying in bed for about 20 hours a day. Like literally got up for maybe 4 hours, if that. And the only like outside world that I saw was the inside of doctors' offices and the inside of hospitals. And I would say most days, but honestly every day, I just felt so sad and like really, really hopeless. And like I said, insanely angry. Like so angry that if I would have had the strength, I honestly probably would have punched a lot of holes in my wall. And I'm not gonna lie when I tell you I actually tried. Like, I actually tried, it didn't work, I wasn't strong enough, okay, whatever. Probably better, I probably wouldn't have been great for me to punch a hole in my wall, but that's how angry I was. I was so mad that I physically was like, I just have to release this, I don't know what to do anymore. So that being said, there was one night in particular that I truly didn't think that I was going to make it. And if I'm being real with you guys, which I hope I can, I'm not sure I wanted to. And so what I did in that moment was got down on my knees in my room and I sobbed and I prayed. And I didn't pray for God to take my pain away. I didn't pray for God to do anything except for what came out of my mouth was, God, I'm ready. Can you please let this illness just take me? I literally prayed and asked God if he would just let my illness just kill me. That's like how hopeless I felt, and it was terrible and it sucked. And it was awful, and I felt very far from God, and I felt very broken because I was feeling these ways, and I felt very angry, like I said, and I felt like I did not even deserve to be around him, but I I had to swallow my pride, and I had to be honest with him anyways. And so, like I said, I was in my room, I got on my knees, and for hours, I just bared my soul to God. And it stemmed from this prayer of just take it away. I just want to go be in heaven. I don't want to be here anymore. I'm tired. Everyone else in my family is tired. I'm sick. I don't feel good. I just don't want to deal with it. And what came out of it was just a lot of me having these feelings and this pent up sadness and things that I just hadn't shared with anybody. And it was just a moment that I was in my room and just needed to share. And so I did. And I kept sharing, and I kept sharing, and then I got in bed, and I laid there, and I cried, and I fell asleep. And what I didn't know is that me being on my knees and praying and talking to God and actually just coming to him from an honest place in my heart was me tearing down all those veils that I had set up. All the things that I said, no, I'm too broken to be with God. No, I'm too angry to be with God. No, I'm too sick to be with God. No, I'm not perfect enough to be with God. Every single veil, every single curtain that I put up, that I just backed every day, just backed a little bit further from God. I tore every single one down. And here's what God did for me in that. I had the most incredible dream I've ever had in my entire life that night. It was so beautiful. In short, kind of what had happened in that dream is I saw myself kind of third party out of I was watching myself, or I knew it was myself, but I wasn't actually there. I was watching with God. And I saw myself as a caterpillar, which was so silly, right? And it was this caterpillar that people were like, standing around and looking at, and they were like, oh, it's just a caterpillar, like it's cool, but like that's it, and then would like walk away. And I just felt the aching of that caterpillar, like, oh my gosh, like, no one wants to be around me, and there must be tons of things wrong with me. And you guys have probably all taken science class, so you know what happens when caterpillars grow up. They cocoon themselves and they become butterflies. And so in this dream, I watched the caterpillar inside of this cocoon. And inside of the cocoon, the caterpillar was sad and crying, and he was like, it's dark in here. It's dark. I can't see. It's dark. I can't hear. Where is everybody? What's going on? I know I wish I would have the people looking at me again, because I don't know what's happening. What's going on? What's happening? And then it started getting this pain in its back. And it was like, oh my gosh, like this pain is unbearable. I can't do it anymore, and it's dark, and I don't know where I am, and I have nobody around me, and I can't hear anybody, and I can't see anybody. And I remember in this dream, I was watching, like an out-of-body type of experience, and I'm watching this caterpillar, and I remember I looked at God in my dream, at Jesus, and I said, that's exactly how I feel. And he was like, yeah, keep watching. And this caterpillar is hurting, and he's in pain, and he's scared. And that's really what it was. He was scared. He was afraid. And so what he did was he stopped everything. He was moving around, and he was wailing, and he was scared, and he was crying, and he was yelling, and he just took a deep breath, and he just said, whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen, but I'm not okay. And I recognize that. And goes to sleep, and the next part of my dream was this caterpillar emerging from the cocoon, and it was a butterfly. And all that pain that he had, all those times, the whole time that he was in this dark place, the whole time he was so scared because he had nobody around him, he didn't know what was happening, he had all this pain from the wings growing, and he didn't even realize that just one day later, all he had to do was just stop struggling and just say, okay, I'm just tired, God. Like, I'm just tired. It's in your hands. God's like, all right, there you go. That dream to me, and hopefully to you guys too, really just filled me with tons of hope. It really just taught me that, like, oh my gosh, all I have to do is just tell God, like, where I'm at, and he wants to make me a butterfly, and he's going to guide me through that, and he's going to help me in that. I mean, it filled me with so much hope that I would have had months before if I wouldn't have allowed my anger to hold me back from experiencing what God truly had to offer me. Here's the thing, I can't stand up here and tell you that you will never experience hardships. I wish I could. I wish I could stand here and I wish I could say, you're never going to have anything hard happen in your life, and it's going to be so great, and peaches and cream and rainbows and unicorns. I mean, that's just not the reality of life. But what I can tell you is that when you are honest with God about what you're doing or how you're feeling, you experience His grace and you experience His glory. Life is hard. Just a few weeks ago, I went through something incredibly difficult that had I not gotten on my knees 6 months ago, I probably wouldn't have survived. But because I cried out to the Lord and was filled with new hope, God gave me just a lot of grace, and I tore all those veils down. And I'm now able to walk in confidence and hope that life is really hard, but God is really great. And now, guys, I hope you know this doesn't have to be just my story. I don't have to be the only one that's filled with hope. In fact, I hope I'm not. I truly want you guys to know that we have full access to God because Jesus died for us to have that. There's no barrier between you and the King of Kings. So what's stopping you from allowing the access? Because the thing is, God's not forceful. And the veil was torn for us to get close to Him, but He won't force you to be close to Him if you don't want to. See, Jesus' purpose, His full purpose, was to be sacrificed so that we had access into the most holy place. And I think that's really incredible. I read this crazy excerpt the other day about Judas. Judas is who betrayed Jesus, right? He turned Jesus into the king. And the quote said, Judas ate too. That's it, just Judas ate too. And the meaning of that was that Jesus knew someone was going to betray Him on the night that He had the Last Supper. In fact, He knew it was Judas. He still sat with Him. He still let Him eat. He still shared communion with Him, all while knowing what was going to come. And that's the thing about Jesus. Anything we do isn't going to get in the way unless we let it. He says, come to the most holy place, because it's no longer a tiny room covered by a veil that no one can enter. It's anywhere and it's everywhere, and it's accessible to you at any moment. And guys, Jesus wants us to eat too. He wants us to eat too. We have full access to everything God has to offer. Not just comfort, not just feeling filled up, not just love. We have access to dreams. We have access to hope. We have access to words. We have access to all of these things that God is like, I have it here. And all you have to do is just run through the veils. That's it. That's all. We have to lay the veils on the altar. And we have to say, God, I don't want to. Let Him take care of the things. And just dwell with Him in the most holy place. Like I said, He wants to give you dreams. He wants to give you words. He wants to give you visions. And most of all, it all comes down to hope. He wants to give you hope. He does. And I think it's that moment that we can get on our knees and we can say, I'm not okay. I'm not right. And that's okay, because God still calls me into the most holy place. Because God still calls me His child. Because God says, I have full access to Him. That's it. Honesty. Just being honest with God and saying, here I am. And I'm going to run as fast as I can to you because I don't want to separate myself from you anymore. Because it's just not worth it. It's just not worth a life full of no hope. It's not worth a life full of no just longing for a future. It's just not worth it. Because what's the point of life if you're not living, right? God calls us to that. He calls us to live. He calls us to live not just here, but in the most holy place, guys. We don't have to live where we are. We get to live in the most holy place with the King of Kings. And honestly, I think that's incredible. And if I can stand up here and say, listen, 5 months ago, I didn't even know if I wanted to live through the pain I was feeling. But God is so good that here I am. That's it. I mean, there's so much hope, guys. And God died so that we don't have to, so that we can have Him. And if we tell God what's going on in our physical world, in our minds, in our hearts, that's the moment that the veils tear. And all we have to do is just run. Just run right into His arms. That's it. That's literally it. You know what? If you don't like running, He'll restore you. He'll restore your lungs. He'll run. He'll run to meet you. He'll say, yes, you're coming to me. I'm going to meet you. And He's there. Oh, man. Sorry, it's just so good. Here's the thing. Jesus doesn't care what you've done because He calls you His. And because He loves you. He just wants you to be honest with Him. There's no condemnation, there's no guilt, there's no shame, there's no hurting, there's only God wrapping His arms around you in a pillow full of hope. And I think that is the most beautiful thing any of us can encounter. God, we thank You for the hope that You give us. We thank You for being the King of Kings that asks nothing of us but just to be honest and to talk to You. God, I just pray for the strength tonight. If anyone needs to tear veils down, if anyone needs to have a moment where they're on their knees and they're crying out to You, God, we pray for the strength to do that. God, we pray for just instilled hope in everyone here tonight. There's hope that only You can bring. God, we just thank You for sacrificing Yourself so that we could have access to You. We thank You for allowing us to run into the most holy place. And God, I just pray if there's anyone here that feels hopeless, I just pray that if they desire dreams or visions or any hope or anything that Your glory has to offer, I just pray that they encounter You in big ways today, God. Tonight, that they go to sleep, that they have dreams, that they see You, that they meet with You, that they feel You, and that they know that they're Yours. So God, again, we just thank You. Just thank You so